Good afternoon and welcome to Day 3, Session 2 of our local candidate interviews on WFJA and WWGP Radio, brought to you by Sandhills Broadcasting and Brick Capital Video. We're here in the studios at WFJA. I'm Bob Joyce and your host for today's Lee County Board of Education candidate interviews. Before we start our first interview, I want to remind our listeners that this afternoon, these interviews will continue to air live on WFJA and WWGP, as well as stream on the WFJA website. Videos of candidate interviews will post on the website as well. 7 candidates for 3 spots on the Lee County Board of Education include Walter Ferguson Jr., Pat McCracken, Eric Davidson, Chris Gaster, Alan Ramel, Kenna Wilson, and Christine Hilliard. We're going to begin our interviews today for the Lee County Board of Education with Democrat candidate Walter Ferguson Jr. Welcome, Walter.
Thank you, Bob. How's it going, brother?
It's doing great.
Great. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And so please, if you would, tell the listeners that are tuned in today, tell them a little bit about yourself and your background and why you're seeking election to the Board of Education.
Okay. Thanks again. Well, my name is Walter Ferguson. I am a junior. I was born and raised here in Lee County, Sanford. Graduated in Lee County High School in 1988. Upon graduation, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I said I'm going to the military like my father. So I went in the military for a short while. I served in the very first Gulf War. I came back to Sanford. I was going to move to Georgia, but I changed my mind and just came back to Lee County. And I started at CCCC in criminal justice. And then I started taking the police academy. And while I was in the police academy, I met the girl who eventually became my wife, named Charlene. And after college, she graduated, I finished, and we got married. So we got married, and we've been married since 1994. We have 3 very beautiful daughters. Sierra, she's my oldest child. She graduated from Lee County High School as well. And she graduated, went on to UNC Chapel Hill. And now she's becoming a pediatrician. She has 1 more year left. She's married, and she just made me and my wife brand new grandparents. We have a brand new, beautiful baby granddaughter named Harmony Rose Taylor, who's our heart.
Congratulations.
Then we have Brittany. She graduated from Lee County High School, and she now is employed with, she went on to East Carolina University, and now she's employed with the credit union. And the last one we have, Bob, is my baby girl, Kennedy. She graduated from Lee County High School as well, and she graduates, as a matter of fact, next Friday from UNCG, and she's going on to veterinarian school.
Wow.
So my wife and I, we're very deeply rooted here with Lee County in the Lee County public school system. A little bit about myself. Like I said, military. I'm a financial representative with Thrivent Financial. I also work part-time with the Lee County Sheriff's Office as a reserve deputy sheriff, so some of you may have seen me out there. And I also serve the board here, Lee County here. I serve at the mental health board, where I am the chair over the Human Rights Committee, and then I also am on the board of the planning board. So I'm chair of the Board of Adjustments. So as you can see, I have a whole lot going on. My wife and I, we own businesses here in Lee County, and you know what brought me back to Lee County was the people. You know, I grew up here. I remember running down these streets, running down the hallways, and the teachers really made an impact on myself, impact on my wife and on our children. And so during the COVID, I was looking at how the school board was being unfairly attacked. And so I just couldn't sit back any longer and listen to the school board be unfairly attacked, knowing the pressures and the demands they were under at this time. So I told myself, told my wife, and we prayed about it, that I was going to run for Board of Education, because I've always been a volunteer in my church, volunteer at work, and we've always done things. So I think this is the best way for me to help Lee County out, is try to help me shape the young minds that are coming forth today.
Thank you, Walter. And you bring up a good point about COVID. Of course, the Board of Education,
Right.
as well as the teachers and the staff, have dealt with all of these challenges from COVID, and they're now trying to return to normal.
Right.
How do you think the Board of Education has handled COVID? And what do you see as kind of the main challenges as we go forward in this kind of return to normal?
That's a great question, Bob. Well, the first thing is COVID was something that we haven't seen in this generation. If I'm not mistaken, I think 1918, when the flu first came out, that was the first time that they had to deal with something like this. But COVID hit the scene like wildfire, and we were just not ready for it. That not just Lee County, but the entire world was not ready for it. So given the circumstances that the teachers, that the board had to make the decisions, I think they did a pretty good job. We have to listen to the health department. The health department gets their orders from, the governor and the secretary, and then they listen to the CDC. Now, we are a school board, so we are taught to believe in science. So science told us that, hey, the best way to avoid getting COVID is separation, mask. So I think by them shutting down the schools and doing the remote learning, that was the best way for us to try for the board and the school system to try to basically, stop the spread of COVID. It was, I myself caught COVID, my wife caught it, and we were down for 2 weeks. Wow. And that's a feeling that I wish on no one. I know people that personally died of COVID just here in Lee County. I think we had about 15,000 plus in Lee County that caught the COVID, and about 149 that died of COVID. And as I was looking on the website the other day, we had just one death about 2 weeks ago due to COVID. The decision was a tough one. It was not a popular decision, but sometimes when you're making decisions for all of people, the decision is not going to be popular. It's going to be one that's going to meet with hostile grunts and complaints like it was, but in the end, the decision was made for everyone, and I'm glad the board made it. So overall, I think the board did what they had to do. They kept us safe the best way they could.
Thanks. And in terms of the remote learning that, was I don't think, as you point out, was not a decision that everybody loved, but certainly it helped protect students and teachers and, staff. How do you think remote learning was received by families? Do you think it was effective, and what do you think we learned from that remote learning experience?
Well, the first thing I think that we learned from remote learning was that we're not ready. We're not ready. What I mean by that is that every home is not blessed with internet. So I know they're working right now trying to put Wi-Fi, all around in every home, because that's the way the world is going. Another thing that we learned is that I can tell you what I learned. If I had a child in the school system back when they had the remote learning, they would have flunked, because a lot of this stuff nowadays I just do not know. But I think that we learned from our mistakes, and we learned from the past, and we have to not, like the old saying goes, if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. So we've learned that we need to work on the internet in homes. Some of the parents need to get more involved in the school system with their children. And also, COVID shined a spotlight on a lot of things. But the remote learning part is that we're just not ready. We have to be prepared for it, because we don't know what's next, because we're not out of the woods yet with COVID. I was just looking this morning on the news, and as a media man yourself, they're saying now cases are on the rise. Yep. So we need to be prepared for remote learning. We had an old saying in the military, the best time to prepare for war is in time of peace. So now's the time that we need to get the teachers ready, get the students ready, just in case we have to go back to remote learning. I hope we don't, but just in case, we need to know what we did wrong, so next time we can do it right.
Good point. Walter, the Board of Education election is now partisan. It didn't used to be. It changed over several years ago, and so the recent discussions, we've had some partisan votes on our board, bring the question of whether elected officials on the board should consider party positions when voting on Board of Education matters. What are your thoughts about partisanship on the Board of Education?
I think the Board of Education should not be. When you're an elected official, particularly on the school board, you are making decisions that are going to affect young minds in the future. It's always been sayings that, put your money where your mouth at. The youth of today is our future for tomorrow, all that stuff. So we have to make decisions based on what's best for all, not what's best for a party. you can't sit here and say that, I don't like it, but my board likes it or my chairman likes it, so I'm gonna go along with what he or she likes. I am a registered Democrat and I'm proud of it. But if something ever came up where I felt it was in the best decision for all of Lee County, and my board chair didn't like it, I'm going to vote for it because they have to do what's best for the people, not what's best for a board. And that came into play a little bit, Bob, during, we had the mask issue. Mm-hmm. The mask issue was one that was a heated debate here in Lee County at the Board of Education meetings. Some parents said that, that the mask is causing kids to be, not being able to mental health right or whatever. And some parents were saying that the mask was protecting. Some saying the kids were just messed up when they came home. But it was two Republican board members that voted for the mask, for the mask mandate to continue because the Democrats did. And from what I understand, they were berated by their party. They were talked about all because they voted along what was right. And that shouldn't be. When you are on the school board, party has no place in it, because at the end of the day, it's about the kids. It's not about your agenda or my agenda. It's about the future of the children and making sure the children and now when I say teachers, I don't mean just teachers. I mean like TAs, principals, custodians, bus drivers. It's best that we do everything what's best for them, not what's best for party lines. So I think, bipartisan is a good thing and partisan is a good thing, but when it comes to this right here, we just need to be equal and throw party out.
Thanks. And that's kind of move on to, as you mentioned, looking at the future. Mm-hmm. If we look at the most important issues that you think will come up before the Board of Education, what 3 or 4 things jump out at you as the most important issues going forward?
Wow, that's a great question too. I've had the pleasure since I've announced my candidacy of talking with some teachers assistants, some bus drivers, principals, custodians, cafeteria workers, you name it, people that work in central office. And the one thing that they are concerned about coming up is the learning gap. And what I mean by that is the learning gap that students are having now due to the remote learning. So what they're concerned about is that we have students that fell behind during the remote learning due to some of them didn't have internet at their homes, like we discussed earlier, or some did not have parents that could help them because they were either working or doing things, so mm-hmm. they were there basically on their own. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is, the first thing we need to, define what the learning gap is, and we need to identify the learning gap in the students. Identify the students that need the learning gap, and then we need to do remedial learning over the summer with those students so we can get them back up to to the level that all students need to be at. But in order to do this, we are going to need the support of the board, the support of the commissioners, for the teachers and whoever else is helping the kids. Also, what I'm looking at is, I was raised up in a time where it's, the old saying went, it takes a village to raise a child. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to need more parental involvement when it comes to our kids, because when the kids leave school and they go home, the teacher is not there to say, turn the TV off and do your homework. When I grew up, Bob, my mom and dad had a saying, the TV don't come on until your homework is done, and you don't go outside until the homework is done. Now, they wouldn't always check it to see if we just told them it was done, but then when the grades came out, they questioned it. So that's one thing, but if we get more parental involvement, because when I go to the football games, baseball, basketball games, it's packed. And if we can get just a fraction of those people, of those parents to show up and volunteer to school, help their children out, I think it would be remarkable of how the students would change, the teachers would build up morale, and then once, one person sees what you're doing, they may volunteer, and I think that would help a whole lot. And then the last thing I think that we need to do is we need to basically give teachers more morale, because right now, if you look at it, teachers are being berated. I mean, they're being threatened with violence. There's a whole lot going on, and we need to boost the morale of the teachers and anyone else that works for the school system. We just need to boost their morale and be there for them to show them that, hey, we understand you have a tough job. We understand that you're working for not as much money as you thought you would make, We understand that some of you still have student loans that you're paying off, but we appreciate what you're doing. So I think this is some of the things that we need to do.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pivot to public safety. You mentioned a little bit about public safety in terms of teachers, but school resource officers have been on the campuses of our schools, and it's become important for the safety of our students and teachers and peace of mind of parents. How do you feel that the SRO program is working? I know you have an affiliation with the Sheriff's Department.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's working? Are there any changes we need to make that would make it better?
Well, the first thing is ex-Sheriff Carter and at the time Major Lyles, they did a good job with the resource officers. Now you have Interim Sheriff Estes. He's doing a good job with the resource officers. And then whoever the sheriff is come November, I don't foresee them making any changes that will affect it in a negative way with the resource officers. Now, I do know that it is needed that we need to keep the resource officers at the schools because, sometimes things do happen. Law and order, we need to keep law and order because our kids go to school to learn and they feel safe. My daughter, when she was at Lee Senior, she was the last one to graduate. She felt safe. I think his name was Officer Rosser. Mm-hmm. She talked about him like he was a good friend because he did what he had to do. Mm-hmm. I personally have never worked at a school because by me being reserved, I just go on the road. But in law enforcement, they teach us, one of the things they teach us is that in order to deter crime, there are 5 uses of force. And the first use of force is just presence. So I think the law enforcement officer presence on the school campuses can deter crime, can deter anything. And we just don't need it for, the students. We may need it for people that try to come on campus because really the resource officers are not there to protect the students from each other. They're in order to stop, people from coming on campus. Because when I was in high school back in '88, we could leave the campus and walk to Burger King and come back. Mm-hmm. You can't do that nowadays because people are not the same. People do things. It's evil people in the world that we have to protect our children from. So I think the SRR program is working fine. I don't foresee them making any changes. Only thing I could say they may do is they may put, a few more at bigger schools. But other than that, I wouldn't change a thing about the SRR program.
All right. You mentioned in your comments a few minutes ago, teacher morale is one thing that you felt was very important. Mm-hmm. Along those lines, we've seen a few local teachers that are driving out of county to work because of higher supplements that are offered in other communities. What things do you think that we could do as here in town, as a Board of Education, county commissioners, of course, as the funders, to help retain this group and overcome this supplement difference with our fellow counties?
Well, the first thing we got to do is we have to pay them. I'm talking to the commissioners right now, to the Board of Education members. We have to pay our school staff. We have to pay them. I said when I first started running that if we do not pay our bus drivers correctly, there may come a time when, they go on strike. And sure enough, it wasn't here in Lee County, but it was in Winston-Salem, Raleigh, Wake County, that the bus drivers went on strike. And this is just the bus drivers. And so if you think they're not important, just ask the parents that had to leave early, get off work early, and go pick their children up because they had no way to school. So we have to increase the supplement for our teachers. We have to make sure that we give our teachers more amenities like they do in Wake County. We have to make sure that our teachers are fairly compensated. Yeah, we're not the biggest county, but we're not the smallest county. But we have to make sure that, the compensation is fair. Because, like I said earlier, a lot of teachers, some of them are just quitting. Mm-hmm. But then the ones that are not quitting, I personally know teachers that drive to Harnett County on a daily basis, Wake County, Cumberland County. I know 3 of them that drive all the way to Johnston County. And they're doing it because Lee County is not doing the supplement. And it's kind of hard when we want to say, hey, we love and we care for you teachers, but then you have certain members of certain parties going before the commissioners saying, do not give a supplement. So if we think the teachers don't talk, we think they don't see that, If we think they're not being recruited by other agencies, we got a long thing coming. So it's not right. So we need to just pay them.
Thank you, Walter.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate your time today, and on behalf of the station, want to wish you the best in the upcoming election. I joined Sandhills Broadcasting and Brick Capital for thanking Walter Ferguson Jr. for talking with us today. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll talk with Board of Education candidate Pat McCracken.